Baby steps.
This is Infants on Thrones.
I'm looking for the further light and knowledge Father promised to send me.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Look for the good in everyone.
So I was laying on the floor, stretching, and thinking, which I do a lot. I wasn't listening to anything except my own thoughts. And I do that a lot. Now I was thinking about how I like to play with thoughts. Kind of the way that I used to play with Legos. But like with thoughts, it's not really something that you put down and you build and you walk away from it and it stays in the toy closet. You know, with thoughts, you inhabit them, and thoughts are attached to feelings. It's all this biochemical chain of events that's happening inside of this amazing body of ours, this living system. And our feelings and our thoughts are kind of like weather patterns at times. See, these are the kinds of thoughts that I like to play with, like Legos, and stack them up. But it's not so much about doing something to something else as much as it's having that experience. And I was thinking, you know, it's not all thoughts that I like to play with like Legos. It's my own thoughts. It's my thoughts. I'm more interested in my thoughts than I am in other people's thoughts. Although my thoughts come from other people's thoughts. And I value other people's thoughts incredibly. But I'll find something really interesting and then I'll like twist it somehow. Tweak it. Well, try what about this? And I think that's been strange for people around me, because I don't think everybody does that. But I was thinking about this, how like I enjoy my thoughts, like I entertain myself. I've learned to entertain myself over the years, and so I never really feel alone, even when I'm alone. And I like podcasting because it's a way that I can kind of flex that muscle of thinking out loud. Sharing it like a digital echo. And see if anything comes back. And I hear from these really cool people. And it all started from this place of trauma. These are the thoughts I was playing with as I was stretching on the floor. Because these habits that I developed over the years of entertaining myself were born out of necessity. And they were a choice that was made, a reaction and a response to create some kind of balance. That was created by this living ecosystem of my body, my nervous system, and the interactions. Those are shaped by other people too. And I know my parents did the best that they could. They didn't really know that they had been raised in a cult. And when I had that thought as I was stretching on the floor, it's foreign to me. To be so blunt about the Mormon church being a cult. I've resisted that for so long. Like just up to the point of being comfortable calling it a cult, but no, it's too normal. It's too normal. It's not, I don't know, backwoods enough. I don't know, whatever I was thinking. But as I've started to understand much better the impact of life upon a person's nervous system, and then the way that these unconscious patterns develop that express themselves in certain ways, I started to understand more about what a cult actually is from maybe a neurological perspective. It's a silly image, but if you think about neurons as like lines of ants, they're like walking around. You've seen these ants that are walking around. And that's a neural pathway. And, each one of those is some kind of a habit, or some kind of a thought, some action that you do. And somebody comes along and they step on those ants. But the ants, like in the brain, they don't get squished and just die. They just adapt. They just go a different direction. Some neural pathways might dry up, but others usually form in their stead. And these are habits and changing patterns and growth. And it's really powerful. It's learned how to survive this collective of neurons, the human body, this collective of cells, orchestrated and coordinated by the neurons. And very resilient. And there are kind of predatory ways of being that prey upon others. Psychological warfare that really make an imprint. Where it's interesting, I'm watching Andor now, and watching these Imperials that really believe that they are on the right side because it's the side of order and law and precision, and they're good people. But they're being fed these fear viruses. Fear of being polluted, fear of the other. fear of immorality. And it shapes that trail of ants, those neural pathways in people's brains through these really alluring ways of communication that we've learned how to rely upon so much, telling each other stories. Our mirror neurons engaging with each other, our limbic systems hooking up and resonating. Resonating. So anyway, these are some of the thoughts that I had and wanted to sit down and record. It also came to me as I was stretching on the floor and I was thinking along these lines. I've been so interested lately in thinking about humans as an extension of this tidal wave of life that started at the dawn of our planet, really, and probably even before then, as matter unorganized organized itself and reached out and grew and developed in all these ways, and here we are, for this time that we're here, in this form that we're here, with these experiences. These are all like living systems that were built upon that. That makes so much sense to me when I think about how different people are and how these defense mechanisms unconsciously really shape our interactions with each other. And again, it's probably because I'm watching a lot of Andor, but I'm thinking about the way that propaganda and narrative can shape the minds. So my parents didn't know that they were raised in a cult. They didn't know that what they thought was love was kind of closed off. Each of them protecting their own wounds in their own ways without really understanding, even still. And throw a 2-week-old child that passes away into that marriage that So I grew up in this environment with good wounded people, and it shaped me in my good wounds and bad. And I find this stuff more interesting than anything else right now, really. And the other part of that I really wanted to record, but it slipped my mind until now, was that it isn't outside the scope of possibility. Or even probability as far as I see it at this point. Thinking about these living systems that communicate with each other, like our neurons do, that we've just started learning about. Like, we're still scratching the surface on what our own internal interconnected network of communication is doing, that's creating all this experience for us. And who's to say that this interconnected sharing of information doesn't happen at discrete levels in ways that we just can't even really perceive of? And if time and space are all kind of interwoven, made out of this fabric of little conscious sentient bits of energy in their own way, or whatever you want to think of it like, there could be like premonitions or prophecies or things that they come out in kind of distorted ways, but the main gist of it is kind of like a ripple that's kind of pushing forward, and all these different ways of expressing it. So I'm thinking about the millennium, I'm thinking about the last days. I was thinking about this Billy Joel song, after 2,000 years, this time when there will be miracles and the hearts of men will turn cold to each other as a sign that the things are changing. It's an end and a new beginning. And seeing just over the course of my life the ways that we've become more interconnected through technology, and like the first Neuralink. I don't know, I saw an article about this video that a guy made just by thinking, because he had Neuralink, couldn't speak, couldn't move. But he was harnessing the power of these neurons to synthesize a new kind of consciousness and a new kind of way of being. Like, we're just starting. And I think there's a lot of fear out there about this. And I don't think any of that fear should be ignored. But I also don't think that it should dominate. I don't think that the fear should smother out the other parts of these tidal wave stories, that after this destruction there's a new birth, and there's a continuity and a flowering. And I think this is part of why I've been so interested in thinking of humans as a tidal wave, in this motion that started long ago, because it just feels like we're at that apex point. The prophets used to prophesy about, and then people would turn that stuff into like ways to control other people in cult-like behavior. And don't you kind of see that cult-like behavior more stretched out, more global? The way that I used to think about cults, at least, it was too small. And like the church I grew up in was too normal, too mainstream. But now you see that kind of like cult-like devotion to ideas and rigidity and just, well, the coldness to other people, with all these excellent reasons why. So yeah, there's reason to fear. But there's more than just that too. And these things I say in the name of myself as I watch my shadow stretch across the back lawn. Even you.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into something a bit different. It's a personal audio recording.
Right. It's called IoT 892, Musings on the Neurological Cult Ripples of Experience 5625 11.35 p.m. M4A. Quite a title.
It is, and it's not like a polished argument or anything. It's really just raw thought, someone thinking out loud, exploring ideas.
Exactly, which is fascinating in itself. You get this unfiltered perspective. So our plan today isn't really to, judge it.
No, not at all.
It's more about pulling apart the main ideas, seeing how they connect, and maybe getting a feel for, well, how coherent it all sounds. The brief was sort of sane or crazy, right? So we'll look at the internal logic.
Okay, sounds good. And listening through, a few themes definitely jumped out, like the nature of thought itself, how trauma or past experiences stick with us, this interesting idea of a cult from a neurological perspective.
Yeah, that was unique.
The power of stories, propaganda and/or gets a mention, and then these bigger picture thoughts on interconnectedness and maybe where society's headed.
Quite a mix. So where should we start unpacking all that?
Well, the recording itself kind of starts with thinking about thinking.
Ah, yes. The Lego analogy. I like that. Playing with thoughts like they're building blocks.
Right, just for like personal entertainment or exploration.
Yeah.
It felt quite relatable, that idea of just messing around with ideas in your own head.
Totally. And the speaker makes this distinction, doesn't he, between his own thoughts and ideas coming from outside. He talks about twisting and tweaking them.
Yeah, it's less about finding the answer and more about the process, the mental sandbox idea.
And that self-awareness is key, I think, recognizing how you think, the difference between just, taking stuff in and actively playing with it.
Definitely. So if we're scoring these ideas like we discussed, maybe on how logical and relatable they feel.
Okay, yeah. For that thoughts as Legos bit, considering its internal logic and just how much it resonates with, well, being human and thinking, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10.
An 8. Yeah, I can see that. It feels pretty grounded in that introspective experience. The key takeaway being, our minds aren't just buckets. We actively shape what's inside.
Precisely. We're constantly constructing and reconstructing.
Okay, so moving on from there. The recording gets into this neurological perspective on cults. That felt like a core concept.
It really did. And the analogy used, well, maybe a bit simple, neural pathways as lines of ants.
Right, the ant trails.
It gets the idea across established patterns of thinking. And the interesting part is the idea that external stuff, the stepping on ants bit, He doesn't just wipe them out. It forces adaptation. New routes get formed. It's redirection, not destruction.
Okay, so ingrained thought patterns are resilient. They just find new ways.
Exactly. And that leads right into the talk about psychological warfare and fear viruses.
Yeah, the and/or connection again. How narratives and propaganda can really grab hold.
By tapping into our emotions, our mirror neurons, the limbic system. The idea is that powerful stories can literally shape those neural pathways, guide the ants.
So compelling narratives become tools for shaping thought on a deep level.
That's the argument being made. And it connects to the speaker's personal experience, reevaluating their Mormon upbringing.
Right. They mentioned struggling to call it a cult, but now finding it too normal through this neurological lens.
Which is a fascinating shift. It suggests this framework helps make sense of subtle long-term influence, maybe more than the traditional, more extreme definitions of cult.
It offers a different angle on how group dynamics and belief systems shape us over time. So scoring this one, thinking about the maybe scientific plausibility as presented and how it helps understand group influence.
It's tricky. The ant analogy is just that, an analogy. But the core idea that experience and influence shape neural structures and behavior, that has a basis in neuroscience. I maybe lean towards a 7.
A 7 sounds fair. It's plausible conceptually, even with the simplified model.
Agreed. Then the speaker takes this rather significant jump.
Yeah, quite a leap.
To humans as an extension of a tidal wave of life.
Right, this much broader, almost philosophical view. From the personal brain stuff to, well, everything.
The idea that we're all part of this continuous flow of organizing matter, stretching back eons. Our complexities, our defenses, all part of this ancient process.
It certainly puts things in perspective. A grand scale view.
And it ties back to propaganda in an interesting way. If we're part of this wave, then the narratives that shape us are influencing the direction of that entire flow.
That adds weight to it.
And the speaker brings in their parents again, good wounded people raised in what they now see as a cult, how their experiences shape the speaker, showing that intergenerational flow within the bigger wave.
So the stories we absorb don't just affect us now, they ripple outwards and forwards through this life wave.
That's the picture being painted. It highlights the profound long-term impact of the information and narratives we internalize.
It's a powerful image, being carried by this huge force, shaped by nature and nurture, essentially. Scoring this on coherence, its ability to offer a framework, maybe an 8 again. It's abstract, but hangs together.
Yeah, I'd go with an 8 too. It offers a kind of meta perspective. It helps contextualize things, even if it's speculative.
Which brings us neatly to the next part, which is definitely more speculative. Interconnectedness, premonitions, future shifts.
Right, this is where we venture out a bit. The idea of information sharing happening on levels we don't perceive.
Like neurons communicating, but on a bigger scale.
Exactly. And then linking that to things like premonitions or prophecies as maybe ripples from that deeper connection.
Okay, so bridging the gap between something like brain function and something much more, well, esoteric.
And cultural touchstones get pulled in the Millennium, Last Days, that Billy Joel song.
After 2,000 years, Themes of change, miracles, but also this growing coldness between people.
All seen as potential signs, indicators of these shifts happening underneath.
And technology is woven in here too, specifically Neuralink. How that might change interconnectedness, create new ways of being conscious.
The speaker acknowledges the fear around that for sure, but also holds on to this idea of renewal, that even after destruction, life continues, adapts.
And it loops back to the tidal wave idea, right? Humanity reaching some kind of apex point.
Yes, and a potential danger there that cult-like behavior could become more global. People clinging rigidly to ideas, losing empathy, that coldness mentioned earlier.
It's a warning almost, tied into this view of increasing connection.
Definitely a cautionary note. Now, scoring this section is tough. You've got observable trends like tech connection.
Mixed with pure speculation, like premonitions as network ripples.
Exactly. It's a real mix. Based on that grounding versus speculative leap ratio, I'd have to give this one a 5.
5. Yeah, that feels right. Some basis in reality, but a lot of conjecture built on top.
Okay, so we've walked through the different pieces. The Legos, the neurological ants, the tidal wave, the ripples of the future.
Like the journey.
So the big question we set out with about the overall sane or crazy score for the whole recording based on how these ideas fit together.
Taking it all in.
Considering the whole arc, I'd probably land on a 6 out of 10 overall.
A 6. Why a 6?
Well, there's clearly a lot of introspection. There's a genuine effort to connect things logically, even if some connections are metaphorical or, speculative rather than strictly evidence-based.
Okay.
There's this drive to understand the self, the world, exploring different ways to explain things, even unconventional ones. It doesn't feel random. There's a thread running through it.
I think I agree with the 6. Some ideas definitely push the boundaries, especially the premonition stuff. But the overall tone feels like inquiry, trying to make sense of things.
Right.
The neurological take on cults is interesting, even simplified. The tidal wave idea is a big, compelling framework. It's not all completely out there, even if parts are highly speculative.
Exactly. So a 6 feels like it acknowledges both the thoughtful inquiry and the speculative leaps. It's a really fascinating window into someone's thought process.
Definitely. So wrapping up this deep dive into the musings, we've touched on playing with thoughts, the neurological view of influence, humanity as a life wave, and these more speculative future ideas.
Our goal was really just to dissect it, see how the pieces fit, evaluate them a bit based on the source itself.
And hopefully that gives you, the listener, something to chew on. Thinking about your own life, your own observations, which of these ideas actually hit home for you?
Yeah, what resonates? And maybe what does that resonance tell you about how you see the world or how belief works? Definitely food for thought.
Ever wonder what happens when you really dig into how we make sense of things, even our own internal thoughts? Today, we're taking that idea somewhere. Well, somewhere pretty interesting.
That's right. We're not just looking at someone's raw thinking, the original recording. We're looking at a previous attempt to understand it.
An analysis of an analysis, putting the analysis under the microscope, you could say.
Exactly. So we're revisiting our deep dive on that audio file, IoT 892 Musings on the Neurological Cult Ripples of Experience, 5625, 11.35 PMM4A.
Right, and it's key to remember that was just someone thinking out loud, raw thought, not some polished argument. Our first look tried to find the internal logic, the coherence.
Even asking that basic question, was it, sane or crazy?
Which now feels a bit simplistic, maybe.
Yeah.
Because today, we're shifting focus.
Completely. We're taking that initial analysis itself and looking at it through a really specific lens.
Okay, tell us about this lens.
It's the perspective of a soul-centered, trauma-based, person-centered therapist, someone who sees exploring ideas, even wandering thoughts, as a form of, psychotherapy itself. Understanding the human experience through that exploration.
Wow, okay. So we're analyzing the analysis therapeutically. And the scoring's different this time.
Totally different. We're ditching the old logic-based scoring. Today, we're reevaluating each point, and every single one is going to get a 10.
A 10 every time.
Every time. But that 10 isn't about being correct in the old sense. It signifies a deeper appreciation, recognizing the inherent human experience reflected in those original musings, the value in the process itself.
Okay, so it's about acknowledging the value in the internal exploration, maybe the courage it takes to just grapple with big ideas out loud.
Precisely. Regardless of how neatly those ideas fit into, standard logical boxes, it's about the human journey behind the thoughts.
Got it. So before we dive into rescoring our own analysis, let's quickly recap the main themes we pulled out last time.
Good idea. There was the thoughts as Legos idea.
Right, playing with concepts.
Yeah.
Then how trauma, past experiences, kind of stick around.
Mm-hmm. And the neurological take on cults, the ant trails analogy.
And the power of stories, propaganda, we mentioned Andor, I think.
We did. And then those broader ideas about interconnectedness, where society might be headed, that kind of thing.
Quite a mix. So let's start with that first one, thoughts as Legos.
Yeah. We initially gave that an 8 out of 10, said it was logical, relatable, the idea of building and playing with thoughts.
So now, through this therapeutic lens, what changes? What deeper layers emerge?
Well, what's really fascinating, I think, is how perfectly that Lego thing captures our active role in, building our own internal world.
Active role? How so?
From a therapeutic view, playing with thoughts isn't just idle brainstorming. It's actually a really fundamental way we process experiences. We explore different facets of ourselves.
Like mentally replaying something, trying different angles.
Exactly. Reconstructing a memory, trying out different feelings about it. That is the internal Lego play. It's sense-making.
So it's the work of understanding our inner landscape, not just random thoughts.
Right. It's about creating this sort of internal sandbox. A safe space, maybe, to experiment with ideas, try on perspectives, integrate difficult stuff, emotions, memories. It shows our capacity for introspection, our drive to find coherence within ourselves.
Okay, I see. So the 10 isn't just for relatability anymore.
No. The 10 is for acknowledging the profound value of that internal process, for self-discovery, for developing a more whole sense of self. That playing shows agency. Agency in shaping your own narrative, which is absolutely vital, especially when healing from trauma.
A 10 for the power of the internal sandbox. I like that. Okay, next up, the neurological cults idea, the ant trails.
Right. We gave that a 7 out of 10. Plausible concept, maybe a bit simplified, but a decent visual for neural pathways.
So how does that image ant trails, external things stepping on them, redirecting thought, how does that resonate with a trauma-informed view of the brain?
Well, it speaks directly to resilience, doesn't it? And also vulnerability. From a trauma perspective, those ant trails can become really deeply ingrained patterns, ways of thinking, feeling, reacting, often developed as survival tools.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Survival patterns.
But then external narratives, especially fear-based stuff, propaganda, what the original recording called psychological warfare or fear viruses, those things can strengthen the negative trails, like making those specific ant paths deeper, harder to leave.
Reinforcing the negative pattern.
Exactly. But the resilience part, that's neuroplasticity. The brain can form new pathways. Therapy, in a way, is often about gently, patiently, creating new trails, offering alternative ways to think, respond.
So the analogy captures both the problem and the potential solution.
I think so, yeah. So rescoring this as a 10 really highlights that inherent adaptive capacity we have. And crucially, the significant impact of those external narratives on our internal landscape, especially connecting to core beliefs and potential trauma responses.
Another 10. For resilience, adaptation, and acknowledging how outside forces shape our inner reality. Okay, moving on. Humans as an extension of a life wave.
Yeah, that got an 8 originally. Abstract, but we felt it had a coherent framework.
Now, through our therapeutic lens, this idea of being part of a continuous wave, how does that connect to things like intergenerational patterns? How our parents' experiences affect us?
That's exactly where it gets really insightful. The soul-centered, trauma-informed view emphasizes that we aren't just isolated individuals. Our experiences aren't in a vacuum.
Right, we inherit things.
We do. Unresolved traumas, belief systems, even unspoken family stories. They ripple down through generations. The life wave metaphor is actually beautiful for capturing that interconnectedness across time.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about a parent who grew up in poverty or maybe in a very restrictive, high-control environment like the recording hinted at.
Yeah.
They might unconsciously pass on certain anxieties or coping mechanisms or even ways of relating to their kids.
Even if they don't mean to.
Often, yeah. Recognizing that dynamic is huge for understanding why we struggle with certain things now. It connects our personal story to a much larger human story.
So the 10 here is for acknowledging that deep interconnectedness across generations.
Yes, and the profound, lasting influence of the past on the present. It lines up perfectly with ideas like transgenerational trauma and our basic human search for meaning within that flow of life.
A 10 for the life wave and its intergenerational echoes. Okay, now for the more.
Yeah.
Speculative stuff. Interconnectedness, premonitions, future shifts. We gave that a 5 originally.
Yeah, because it mixed observable trends with things that are harder to pin down. Speculation.
But from the therapeutic view, even speculation has value.
Absolutely. It's about the meaning behind it. Take the feeling of interconnectedness. Even if you can't prove it scientifically, what does that feeling do for a person?
Well, it could relate to empathy, compassion, belonging.
Exactly. It speaks to a fundamental human need for connection and meaning. Whether premonitions are real or not isn't the main point therapeutically. The experience of feeling connected to something larger or sensing future possibilities, that reflects a deep desire to understand our place, to find purpose.
And the flip side, worries about the future, societal shifts, maybe feeling coldness, as the recording mentioned.
That taps into fears of disconnection, isolation. Even thinking about tech like Neuralink forces us to confront basic questions about selfhood and connection. So the 10 here acknowledges that core human drive to find connection and meaning, even when things feel uncertain or scary. It honors the psychological weight of our hopes and fears about where things are going.
Okay, a 10 for the human need for meaning and connection, even amid speculation and uncertainty. That brings us to the final piece. The overall sane or crazy score we gave the original recording.
Which was a 6 out of 10, kind of a middle ground score.
Yeah, acknowledging thoughtful inquiry, but also the speculative leaps. How do we reevaluate that score now?
Well, the whole sane or crazy framing just dissolves, really, through this therapeutic lens. It's not the right question.
That's the right question, then.
It's about recognizing the inherent human drive. The drive to explore, to question, to try and make sense of our inner world and the world around us, even if the paths we take seem unconventional or, not strictly logical.
And there's a vulnerability in sharing those raw thoughts, like we said before.
Huge vulnerability. And courage. From a therapeutic perspective, the coherence we value isn't about matching some external standard of logic. It's about witnessing the individual's personal journey of seeking understanding and meaning within their own unique experience.
So instead of judging the destination, we value the journey itself.
Precisely. So rescoring the entire endeavor, the whole act of recording those musings, as a 10, it emphasizes the intrinsic value in that process of self-exploration. The human quest for understanding is valuable in itself, regardless of whether the conclusions fit neatly into boxes. It's about honoring that specific human journey.
A final 10, reframing judgment into appreciation for the journey of discovery.
Exactly. And when you look back, applying this lens, you see how all those pieces, the Legos, the ant trails, the life wave, the speculations, they all reflect really valuable aspects of being human. The consistent 10 isn't about saying every idea was factually perfect.
Right, it's about recognizing the striving, the human striving for understanding, for integration.
Spot on. It just shows how much a shift in perspective can illuminate, finding deeper meaning where maybe before we just saw, well, something less clear.
It really encourages looking at internal experience with more, I guess, compassion.
Compassion and maybe a recognition of the inherent wisdom that can be found there, even in the messy bits.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Think about a time you were really wrestling with an idea, maybe something confusing or deeply personal, trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, that internal grappling we all do.
How might, looking back at that process now through a different lens, maybe a more compassionate, human-centered one like we've used today, how might that change your understanding of it? Not judging the logic, but valuing the effort, the exploration itself.
Recognizing the inherent worth in your own journey of trying to figure things out. That's maybe the real takeaway.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.
And if you'd like to do more than listen to Infants on Thrones, I am now a licensed therapist in the state of Arizona. I'm currently working at 2 locations. Between the 2 of them, I think we accept most forms of insurance, and I am accepting new clients. Infants on Thrones has a very special place in my heart. Podcasting in general does. I expect that there may be a handful of you out there who've been listening to me since I first started podcasting back in 2010 with Mormon Expression. As you've heard in this episode, I love playing with ideas. I love making connections. My master's degree in folklore combined with a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling are really helpful when I'm sitting across from a client and I'm listening to their stories and I'm listening to their experiences, the things that they want for their life, the reasons for their depression or anxiety or problems with impulse control, anger management, communication and relationships. So many areas that I think are really underserved when it comes to our own self-exploration. At the Spirit of Sonora Counseling and Wellness, I'm joining Richard Thomas, a seasoned therapist who offers integrative, soul-centered therapy for individuals, couples, and groups who are ready to face and transform the pain that has held them back. That comes right from the website. I'm so excited to be working with Richard and to be working at the Spirit of Sonora, as well as the work that I'm doing at Free Life Wellness Center. And if any of you are curious about therapy, I offer a 15-minute free consultation. You can find me on my Psychology Today profile or email me here at infantsonthrones@gmail.com, and I'd love to see if working together might be a good fit, where we can sit down together and break out our Legos and play with ideas and feelings and the way they're impacting your life together.